using those kinds of excuses is just incredibly hateful in my mind.
Totally.
It's disrespectful. It's disrespectful to think that adoption is this simple thing that you can just like go do, or that you should be forced into a pregnancy that may not be the right choice for you. It's disrespectful. It's disrespectful to again, this divine choice that people make around parenting. That's how families are built. And that's the choice behind it. So yes, adoption is a wonderful option for some people, not for everyone. And it does not take into consideration the full complexities of these deeply private decisions that we make that no government should ever be a part of.
Let's talk about creating a life and country we're proud of. Together, I'm your host, Alvina Vasquez. Welcome to Alvina Talks Shift. Adrienne, thank you for joining me today. I know I've talked to you about this podcast for a while now, and we're finally able to get something scheduled. And I so appreciate you doing this because of the important work that you're doing right now. Very busy time of year. So I appreciate how much time you're spending with me today.
Of course.
Adrienne is a leader in the choice movement right now at one of the leading organizations, most historical organizations in women's health, Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains. So welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you, Alvina. It's so exciting to see you and to be on the podcast.
Besides the amazing work that you're working on now, I wanted to dive a little bit about the nonprofit space. I feel that this is an opportunity for a lot of young leaders to elevate their profiles. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the work that you're in now, I want to take a broader look at your experience and your experience. You've worked at the Nonprofit Association. You've done a lot of foundation work.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think was your biggest learning experiences from those roles in the nonprofit space? And what role do these nonprofits play in our society overall, in our political sphere, and also like in our communities?
In preparing for the podcast and talking with you, I reflected back on like, how did I get here? I mean, my entire career has been with a nonprofit organization. And I went to school at the University of Colorado at Denver. So just on the Denver campus, a very urban setting. And early on, I was taking these classes, first generation college student, really getting to understand things like politics and government affairs and economics, and really understanding the weight of racism, I would say, on this country and in my own family. And just, I don't know, like being exposed to that kind of information made me very motivated to want to change and improve Denver in particular, and like where my family lived and where I came from. And so nonprofit organizations were a really wonderful vehicle to do that right away. And I was like, oh, you get paid? You can get paid for this? I was volunteering as a door knocker. I wanted to help families be able to access more financial security. And so I became a community organizer with the Community Resource Center. And that was, I don't know, 25 years ago, it was like over 20 years ago. And it carved this path for me professionally, but also the way that you just described it, it really helped me understand the importance of nonprofit organizations in social movements and of elevating democracy.
You came from Southern Colorado, small town, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like, being pulled away from that community that you're so close to into this urban setting and meeting this very diverse, I
Yeah.
imagine, students, teachers, and experiences?
Yeah, good question. I mean, my graduating class was, I don't know, like 80 people or so. We knew everybody. My family knew everyone. And I like that. It's a neat thing to be known, especially as I'm getting older. And so, in one way, I think that's really comforting. But to your point, it is a very big culture shock to then come into an urban setting and seeing lots of different kinds of people and lots of different levels of economics, I would say, and a lot of different kinds of um, ways in which people identify themselves. So for me, understanding that I could have my own personal goals toward social change connected with a profession was incredibly helpful, and it very much energized me. And to your wonderful question, I kind of did feel separated from my family at that time. I felt like I needed to make a way for myself and be really involved. And I love work, and I was very driven to work. And so there were some years there, I would say, during college and maybe right after college, where I separated myself from my family just a bit. And now, over time, of course, I see them all of the time, every week. I mean, at least someone in my family. We have lots of holidays together, lots of family. But certainly in my early 20s, I needed to kind of figure out who I was and what I wanted to be a little bit separate from my family.
So you built this career in the nonprofit space and in the foundation, like you began with the community resource center and then you went to the foundation side. What was that jump like for you to going from being an organization that's raising funds to being an organization that's giving funds? And did you see any discrepancies on who was getting the money and
Oh, sure.
who gets the resources?
Just Alvina, just to say thank you for asking because it was a hard decision for me. I was pregnant with my first son. I have two boys now. So I was, I don't know, 6 or 7 months pregnant with Mateo. He's now 16. So this is 16 years ago. And my husband was teaching at the time. And I was kind of proud that we were scrappy, like we were just barely making it and very involved with his school and his students and very involved with a nonprofit at the Community Resource Center, as I mentioned. And then a wonderful friend and mentor, Lauren Castile, who worked at the Denver Foundation at the time, invited me to apply for this job. And she was like, it's very competitive. I can't make you any promises, but I think that you would be a good candidate. And I really struggled with this thought of being on that side of privilege. And to your point around money pieces of like being in charge and thinking about how money would be distributed rather than standing up in a nonprofit organization to find funders. But my husband, Dan, was like, are you crazy? You need to apply for that job. He's like, the benefits are fabulous. It's a huge pay raise. Like, you've paid your dues. You don't owe anybody anything. And it was funny because we don't have a relationship where he would like coach me on where I wanted to be professionally, but he was so honest and real about it. He's like, of course, foundations need people like you to work in them. And so making that shift, I have to admit, in the beginning was amazing. There was like a corporate credit card. We traveled everywhere. I got to eat out. I was staying in hotels. And then after a while, Lauren, my then boss, was like, okay, now let's get you settled down here a little bit. This is hard work. And she taught me how to be an intentional, thoughtful professional in a foundation space that also separated my identity from the power I had. So I'm not going to lie. Like when I worked at a foundation, I felt beautiful and funny. Like everybody wanted to come talk with me. And, Lauren had to teach me that's not about you. That's not you. That is this wealth. This is what we put on when you work in a foundation. And so I had to find my own community, I think, of people of color
Mhm.
primarily who struggled with privilege and struggled with the sense of how does institutional racism kind of weave itself through foundations. And we had to keep each other in check for sure to think about how we were going to do our jobs well and understand the privilege and the weight of responsibility that we had in that space.
And what was at the time, I'm sure you were working with young people just like getting into the philanthropy space. I've talked to this with
Mhm.
Naomi, who we both know about how these philanthropy spaces, people don't know these jobs exist. And very rarely
Mhm.
is it people of color, young people of color that are seeking these positions out. So,
Mhm.
how do you make a path for them? How do they find out about this?
Through us. I mean, that is, again, Lauren Castile's an African American woman. She was the first Black president of a foundation in the state of Colorado. And so she taught me to constantly be scanning the room for people of color of talent. And I still do it now. And that's what she did for us. I mean, she's got a whole bunch of folks who, a former mayor of Denver was her intern at one point. And
Wow.
so I think we all have to be thinking about um, how we keep that door wide open and are constantly looking for talent. Especially now, I think the labor market is all over the place. It's really hard to figure out what's a good fit for people. So, at Planned Parenthood, the Rocky Mountains right now, we've established this equity lens and a sense of belonging with our recruiting team. So it's not two different spaces. It's not like DEI work happens over here. It's all embedded in the way we think about our hiring and our training and our onboarding and supervision and the way we think about orientation and promotions, et cetera. And I learned that from Lauren, who came at it from the civil rights movement. And I think that that's the long arc, right? That we think about in developing talent. It's got to be a long view. It's not like short rewards right now. It is very much about seeing Adrienne Mansanares, right, coming straight out of college, and like I was not groomed well at all to be able to have a professional career. It took a lot of mentors, a lot of people believing in me, and a lot of people who gave me grace when I made a mistake, when I had my own kind of fears or doubts, imposter syndromes that can make people feel edgy or
Yeah.
like there's a chip on a shoulder in some way. And so being forgiving in those spaces, I think, was really important for me. And I hope I give that to others as well.
So, in the nonprofit space, obviously the way those are ruled is through a board of directors. Can you
Hmm.
describe that
Hmm.
process, and you as a person who serves on board and you who
Hmm.
also is managed by board, what that means? And where are
Hmm.
the opportunities for professional growth in those areas?
Again, another thing that you don't really know unless someone opens the door and is like, hey, come over here. There's these things called boards of directors. I think you'd be great on one. And so all nonprofit organizations have a board of directors. And I love that. It's because they're tax exempt organizations. They don't pay taxes. So there's no public oversight except for these boards of directors. So there's a lot of power in that. And the boards of directors are responsible for the health of the organization. So early on, I knew that I wanted to be on boards. I enjoy them. And some people don't, which I get. Like there's just some people who are like, I don't need a board to be on, because they can be challenging. It's a group of volunteers who are responsible for the financial health of an organization, make sure that the organization itself has a vision and is moving forward and maintaining its mission. But you're also not staff. Like when I serve on a board, I'm not rolling up my sleeves and working at that organization. You have to keep a real distance. And there are some people who want to be a volunteer and they want to have much more hands on connection with an organization. That is not a typical board of director. Most boards of directors are looking again more at the financials. They're overseeing the CEO or the executive director and making sure that the leadership has the resources that they need to be able to run the nonprofit organization. I don't know. I love that space. So that's one. I think just to say some people may not want to sit on a board of directors, and there's lots of other ways you can be involved with a nonprofit. But for people who do want to be on a board, especially for BIPOC or people of color, I think that aligning yourself with that executive director and really believing in them and trusting that they're the right person for the job, that's like the first thing I look at with an organization is, do I believe in that executive director? Do I want to be inspired by them? And then I would, look to the organization. The other thing about boards of directors is that it's more than just volunteering your time. You do want to give and be a donor at whatever level that works. I mean, the first board I was on, I think I gave $50 that year, and it felt like a lot of money for me at the time. So it's not about the amount of money necessarily, but it is saying to the staff and to the organization and to other donors that as a board member, you believe in this organization so much that you're going to contribute financially to it. And so I don't know. I think some people can get a little nervous about fundraising or nervous about finances, but all good things cost money. It's
Right.
like in this country that when we believe in something, there's money involved. And so getting familiar and comfortable with money, I think, is important to be a part of a nonprofit board. And then I will always say too, I have like some of the most dear relationships because I've sat on boards with people. It is a unique experience that you go through. Most boards have a couple terms, meaning you commit to like 2 or 3 years and then you get renewed. It's a big chunk of your life that you're spending
Totally.
volunteering for an organization that you love.
If somebody's interested in being on a board, how do they go about
Mm.
finding those roles?
Sure. Yeah. If someone is interested in joining a board of a nonprofit organization, I think emailing the executive director is the best way to do it. It's just to reach out. The other thing that I would do, and I do it all the time whenever I learn of an organization, almost every website has a menu option it's called about or something like that, like us people or something. And if you click on that, you'll see the staff and who's on the board. And just taking a look at who's on the board, what kind of representation that they tend to have, that helps me understand a nonprofit organization a lot by learning who's on the board. The other thing, similarly, there are commissions, and commissions are the volunteer governing bodies of our government. So city government, state government, county government all have a ton of commissions, like women's commission, commission on transportation, people living with disabilities, so many places in which volunteers from the community help oversee aspects of government. And those are great places. You apply for those. And again, you could just get on a site and just Google those and take a look at. I was surprised to learn how many commissions oversee so many aspects of our world, of what the city or the county or the state does. Some of them are by appointee, but many of them are not. They really, it's almost like being on a jury, it's like
Right.
this piece around representative democracy. We have an opportunity to be really involved in decisions that impact our lives. And again, some of them are like, if you're a plumber, right, and you needed, like, there's a regulatory body and it's by your profession, but many of them are open just to anyone in the community. And so applying for those, and then you'll see, again, if you're interested in applying for a commission, there's always someone who's in charge of reviewing those applications, who understands if there's going to be an open spot or not. Back in my day, Anthony Aragon used to do that for the city of Denver, and he was so open. I was like surprised at how much he wanted to talk to people. He
Yeah.
wanted to get community members on those commissions because that's how government then works. So anyway, just to say, for boards of directors, I look at the executive director and who's already on the board itself. And then for commissions, it's much more open and you can get a lot of information online.
Also, not a lot of people know this, and I actually didn't know this till recently, but the Secretary of State's website has a training for folks to
I didn't
be
know
on
that.
boards. Yeah, and it describes, like, what a
Cool.
C3 board is, what a C4 board is. You
Uh-huh.
can actually do the training. It's like self-guided, right? It's just like a video and slideshow
Yes.
that you go through, but it really does show you as a board member what should you look out for? Is there, insurance and like all of these things that you should
Uh-huh.
know before you join a board. So we'll put all those links in the bio.
Yeah. Is it free? I didn't know
It
that.
is free. Mhm.
That's cool. I should have my board members take a look at it because I mean,
Yeah,
why not? You
totally.
can always learn more. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're doing super important work in the women's choice movement. And I took note when you talked about how you're changing your staff because there's been a lot of uh, conversations about maternal health for women of color in these reproductive health spaces. So, what is Planned Parenthood doing in that area? And then we can move on to the campaign and protections part.
Yeah, sure. I just to say what I don't know, may just feel really obvious for everyone, but our health is so important to everything we do, whether or not you want to be a parent or if you don't want to be a parent, whether or not you want to go after a big promotion or you don't, whether or not you want to start your own company. Um, Everything that we do is just impacted by our health. And for many, many, many people, it's sexual and reproductive health that is so critical, especially if you think about as you're like a college age or in high school and you're starting to like get your path, your entire life can be impacted by your ability to access reproductive and sexual health care. And for so many people of color in particular, there's big barriers to that care. So we know that people of color tend to have, again, less economic options, tend to have fewer options around health insurance, or may not be connected into the world of public health care like Medicaid or any other kind of health care. And so it's very important to me that when we talk about serving community or when we talk about patients that are coming into Planned Parenthood, it is we're doubling down on efforts to get to people who may not otherwise have care. So in my region is Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Southern Nevada, so Las Vegas, Nevada. So I travel to those 4 states all of the time, looking to build partnerships to get to patients who just need to understand and know where they can go. It's just accessing those resources. That's one. And then I work to hire people from the communities that we're most connected to. Because when you walk into a health center, you want someone that looks like you or that went to high school maybe, or like, now, of course, we want to be very private and confidential. And I think Planned Parenthood's known for that confidentiality, but it also has to be very compassionate and expert care. And so just to say, there's a big connection and relationship, I think, to the healthcare that people are able to access and their ability to like choose their own paths and their decisions. And that very much is connected to how you feel when you get that healthcare. Do you feel like you have a sense of comfort and it's welcoming? Or, and of course, the opposite is you feel like there's stigma, you feel different, you feel like you've done something wrong. And that then leads to bad outcomes, right? That
Right.
also leads to like these like deterioration of our healthcare. So it's with that in mind, that relationship between community, our patients, and our employees, that I do my best to lead Planned Parenthood.
And it's so important, that community element, because there are blind spots. The medical system is really built on this patriarchal, you're really not there to serve women or women of color. We just heard of another woman who passed away after a stillbirth. And I know a friend of mine experienced a very traumatic birth. And there are blind spots in the medical field. And so it's really important to have community led, community centered clinics like yours.
Yeah, and one in which there's a feeling of dignity,
Yeah.
regardless of a person's decision, regardless of where they come from or where they're going. I just I try to lead with that word. I want everyone to feel a sense of dignity. These are very private, personal discussions that we're having in our health centers, or even, like this via telehealth. We have an app, you can get things on your app if you want, but regardless of the modality of care, I want every one of our patients to feel a sense of dignity. And that, I think, is possible um, in the healthcare space. But you mentioned it, Alvina, like there is a political side to that, and the attacks that come politically that require so much more work to maintain that sense of dignity and to move through the barriers that can come from these external attacks that happen.
So, what's at risk in Colorado or our surrounding states that you're servicing in this climate?
Yeah, I see two really big risks. And the first one is that, about half of the states across the country have some form of abortion care ban. And that is terrible. So if you think about these surrounding states, just Texas, right? A hugely populated state. If people in Texas cannot receive abortion care, they also have a very hard time receiving birth control or cancer screening. Cervical cancer rates go up. Sexually transmitted infections go up. We know that attacks on abortion care and those bans that go into place to ban abortion care have ripple effects beyond just abortion care. It's all forms of reproductive health care. That is bad for this country, and it's
Yeah.
bad even for us living in Colorado. Obviously, like there's the empathetic feeling of it, but there's also just the real public health crisis that's happening. So I'm very nervous about that. And now what we're seeing is so many people traveling from Texas into Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada to receive abortion care. And I'm proud, I'm very proud that we're able to offer that care. And I feel a tremendous responsibility to do that. But I mean, I have to be honest, I worry about our local patients. Like, are we seeing everyone who lives in rural Colorado? Does anyone in Denver who needs to get on birth control, are they able to do that without having too long of a wait or a financial burden? So these issues that are high levels of risk in different states absolutely have an impact in those of us in these states where a lot of our healthcare is protected.
So I want to say something, because when the abortion ban came down in Texas, so I adopted my son, as you know. And when those abortions bans started coming out, you heard a lot of folks from the extremes talking about, well, adoption is always an option.
Mm.
You don't need to have an abortion. You can adopt. And I just want to say, number one, you shouldn't force somebody to go through that trauma, birth mom, child,
Yes.
family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, it is an option for some. It's not an option for everybody. And it's
Mm-hmm.
still traumatic when everybody's doing it for the best of the baby. Like, it's still a traumatic experience. Not only that, it's so costly. So I just want to put
Yes.
it out there. Like, as an adoptive mom, to me, yes, it's an option, but that's why we're choice, right? It's your choice
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
pursue that type of experience, which is not easy for anybody in it. Um, so I just want to put it out because I was very frustrated by that, by those comments that were made by the extreme about, oh well, adoption. It's not easy. It's not always the best choice, and it's also not everybody's choice.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that personal story. It is um, frustrating to me. I find that in taking away people's liberties and rights, using those kinds of excuses is just incredibly hateful in my mind. It's
Totally.
disrespectful. It's disrespectful to think that adoption is this simple thing that you can just like go do, or that you should be forced into a pregnancy that may not be the right choice for you. It's disrespectful. It's disrespectful to the, again, this divine choice that people make around parenting. That's how families are built. And that's the choice behind it. So, yes, adoption is a wonderful option for some people, not for everyone. And it does not take into consideration the full complexities of these deeply private decisions that we make that no government should ever be a part of.
So, what can people do to take action today?
Yes, I love this question, Alvina, because it's so much. I mean, there's like, it really depends, I think, on the person and what kind of change they want to influence. So, of course, let me just start with Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains. So, for us, if people want to get involved as a volunteer, we'll put that link in. Um, so people can volunteer. we I'm always looking for board members, as we talked about, like really good board members serving on reproductive and sexual health care organizations is the future of this movement. I love donors of all size. Every donation, I mean, we have donors who give $5 a month and all the way up, because every donation that we're able to have means I can see more patients who can't afford their care. And that's really important, to be able to see patients that are traveling or patients that are here who may not have the full, I don't know, $300 that it may cost for their appointment. For me to be able to say, we have donors that are going to support you if you can do half of that, it's wonderful. It's a very rewarding thing to be able to see patients. And we're able to do that because of donations of all sizes. So I would say, consider giving for sure. There's also, we have a big movement of other kinds of reproductive and sexual health organizations that do more advocacy, more lobbying. Organizations like Color, for example, that do training for Latinx folks that want to get involved and do and think about reproductive and sexual health care as freedoms and the full spectrum of rights. So there's a lot of partner organizations that could also use support. So I think it really is about what people want to do and where they find their skills and their ability to give, and matching those up to something that is moving forward and getting more and more nonprofit organizations kind of as an ecosystem to be stronger.
So, in our last few minutes, I just wanted to touch on the fact how this isn't just about women, that this is also about the men in
Mm.
our lives, our dads, our brothers, our husbands, our boyfriends, our partners, and how they need to also be involved in this movement.
I'll just tell you the first story that came to my mind as you were saying that. First, I got goosebumps. And then I will say, in my health centers, particularly in Albuquerque, and then one of the health centers that's kind of by the airport over in Park Hill, we have started to have our volunteers recognize when men are coming with their partners. And again, they're coming from Texas, a lot of pickup trucks, a lot of Texas license plates. But what we've had to do is redesign to redesign our waiting rooms so that those men can come in, have a snack, get something to eat, just to sit, use the restroom
Interesting.
because they've been driving. Isn't that crazy? They just have been driving so long. And these men care so much about their partners, and they want their partners to have whatever kind of medical care that she needs, that they get really upset. Like they feel the frustration of these rights going away in, back where they live in Texas primarily. And so, so just to say, I think that there are a lot of men that are involved on the other side of getting rights back and understanding how like ridiculous this is that there's such an attack. So there's that. But I'll also say we also have a lot of non-binary, non-gendered patients who are seeking transgender care. They may be transitioning to becoming a trans male or trans female. And so there's a whole spectrum of gender identity that also very much needs the rights to healthcare to be able to live those lives that they have in their mind that they can imagine for themselves.
Adrienne, this was an amazing conversation.
Do you feel like we talk shift?
I think we did talk shift. Because we're shifting back and we're trying to push that shift back to where it needs to be and be a place where women get choices.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks so much for the invitation, really.
Thank you for watching Alvina Talks Shift. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, engage, empower, evolve. If you liked this episode, or if you want more content like this, go to alvinatalkshift.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.